Hello and welcome to the Wonkette Weekend Live Chat. That is totally, definitely live and airing right now on Sunday. And that is when the time at which we are talking to you, all of you. I am Robyn Pennacchia, and this is the lovely and talented Stephen Robinson.
Hi, Robyn. So you're back in Chicago. How is the climate crisis affecting you?
It's hot. It's hot. Could not have gotten away with wearing tights yesterday, which I was kind of mad about. That was like my big personal climate crisis. Because I hate having bare legs, or rather I don't feel like shaving my legs. So like tights are preferable. So that was my big personal climate related annoyance. It's very deep.
Do you have air conditioning?
Yeah. Thank goodness. Yeah.
So a lot of places in Portland do not. In fact, even in some places in Portland, Oregon, the buildings don't allow you to get air conditioning, which is a mixture of
what?
Yeah. So if you were renting an apartment, I think you're renting an apartment. For a lot of renters, so I was talking to my hairstylist about this. She's like, she had to go to her parents. The last heat wave and the current heat wave, she did the same thing. She went to her parents and like near the coast to hide out because her building, you're not allowed to get air conditioning because this is like a building that was built presumably when the climate was drastically changing in
that is bananas. I mean, I realize it's like generally like more temperate there than some other places, but like
it hasn't been in a while. So my wife is a native. She grew up and it was very, no one needed air conditioning during the summer. So it's like there's one very hot night or something, or day, and you are working in a place with air conditioning, but that just hasn't been the case. You're more inclined to have like week-long heat waves where, like hide the small children and old people. So
are you actually like fine with heat waves though? Because like you grew up in the South, so like
yes, but everything is like there's a whole infrastructure for it. So this is actually going to be relevant to the larger hit. So in the South, there's an infrastructure. The homes are built, which I found, because I'm a boring middle-aged man, I find the history of home construction fascinating. So the whole Gun Shack, which we all know from great rock songs, but like in the South, that is actually a great cooling mechanism. So a lot of homes are sort of structured for that way. And most homes, was never considered a luxury to have air conditioning in the South. If you were even lower income, you had air conditioning. You had
because otherwise you just die, I would assume. I've never been in the South during the summer, but like I imagine it's unpleasant. Is all.
Well, I mean, ironically, you'd be advised to bring a sweater. You would define, if you went to Greenville, South Carolina in the summer, you would define it as being very cold. That would be your takeaway, because wherever you are, it's
air conditioning. Yeah.
It's always air conditioned. It's like 60 degrees everywhere. And no one kind of walks, especially in some parts of, no one walks around. So you're going from one air conditioned spot to another.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no, I've heard them say this on Real Housewives of Atlanta, which is my primary vehicle for understanding Georgia as a state.
Or, you just hang out on
other than our gal Marjorie. So.
or you're just sort of hanging out, like just chilling, right? You're just sort of on a porch, heavily shaded, and it's, or you walk around, you're drinking
lemonade, I imagine, like that, like with actual lemons in it in a pitcher and shit.
Oh yeah.
And also big hats.
New Orleans and Savannah, which are very civilized places, there's no open container law. So there's lots of, you can, drink.
That I do know about.
But there's no kind of, it is much more structure. There's a whole sort of infrastructure for that. So places where it was reaching like 100 degrees. At first, you're like, oh, it's not so
Yeah.
bad. It's only 40 degrees in London, but that's Celsius, which is hella hot. So they just no infrastructure for that type of weather. They don't have a lot of air conditioning. The buildings are often built to retain heat.
Yeah.
So,
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
quite, so it is.
Cold there usually.
Yes, so they are kind of in a tough fix, and it winds up being this sort of vicious circle of, well, we probably shouldn't be running air conditioning a whole lot. That can't be our solution, but we have to, or people will die. Wow, I really wish we'd done something about this 20 or 30 years ago. It is this weird part of life where we're living through the prelude to the dystopian future movie. And here's what happened, and it's suddenly like people in sweltering in Antarctic or something, and then suddenly now everything's terrible. So I don't know. There was some encouraging news this week that we might possibly pass a climate bill thanks to Manchin behaving, because
for now, I don't want to count any chickens before they hatch with that man.
Yes, before this airs, it could be Cinema could have killed it, or who knows.
Even though it's Sunday, definitely right now.
We don't know. Any point now, so we're going to try to avoid looking very foolish, but it'd be great if some climate action is progressing. I find
yay, let's not murder the planet. That would be super great.
Yes. It's so, I remember like Ben Shapiro, who's someone people believe he should take seriously, but behaving like, again, like the dystopian films where you have the obvious straw man. He's talking like the bad guy in a Captain Planet episode. Like, come on, no one really. Can we just try to be fair and balanced? But he's not. He was the one who famously was just like, well, if it gets too hot, just move. Or if there's your home gets flooded, go just move. And some British guy on the internet had the clip of where he just interrupts the conversation. It was like, move to sell their homes to who? Fucking because he doesn't understand how, like, wow, you don't understand how anything works. It's like, I can get.
Well, if people would just get on like morphing into mermaids, we'd be all set.
Exactly. That's going to take a while. But like, you can't sell, like, who's going to buy your property at this? You'll never.
Yeah.
What will generally happen is by the time it's like, I need to move because where I live is uninhabitable, then is what's going to happen is like the bank has taken possession of your home because you're underwater on your mortgage and you're underwater.
Yeah.
In general.
Literally.
And poor people come in and live in your place, and you get no money to buy, which is now rarer. Like, it's going to be essentially wealthy people chasing. And I've seen some climate person saying that we get we understand why people say, climate change affects all of us. The burning of the globe affects all of us. But we need to be honest and say, in a world where 1% of the population has all the money, that 1% will find the 1% of the world that is inhabitable. And the rest of us will be living like in pits of
or they'll be the people sent off to the planet that they find is like inhabitable. They'll get to go hang out on Earth too. Like,
well, the terraforming is fascinating because they always talk about making Mars habitable for humans. Well, you should probably do that here, like because parts of our world are becoming uninhabitable. But the history of air conditioning is, again, because I'm boring, is fascinating because that is an example of terraforming here, like New Mexico, Nevada, Arizona was like, you could not live there. There was like places until air conditioning arrived, and that allowed kind of a civilization. Again, it is like the Martian Chronicles, where this is sort of everyone lives, the gated communities are sort of the dome cities, and then you drive, you're only kind of to your other destination. You come out and you can't. My in-laws have a place in Arizona, and because at a certain point, they all white people of a certain demographic are asked where to go. It's either Arizona or Florida.
Yeah.
I think Jewish people get,
Boca Italians get Naples, which is appropriate.
So
my dad's got a place there, so yeah.
My in-laws are not Jewish, so they are in Arizona. And so my wife was visiting them once years ago, and I think when they had first moved there, she was like, so I asked my mother-in-law, I was like, oh, let's go for a walk. It'd be great. And she's like, oh yeah, well, okay, let's get up at 4 a.m. because that's the only time at that point that you can go outside.
Oh my God.
Fire. So it's like, a nice little 4 a.m. walk, which is why they don't have daylight savings time there. It's like, yeah, we've got enough daylight. We don't really want to save this. So, but it's crazy. Like the stuff you're seeing, the runways in London, catching fire.
Yeah.
It is just a disaster. People are dying. They can't function this way. And we, as you often say, that we never get thank you cards for being right. But it's just like, well, we really need to address this. But I mean, I think the Republican response is no, more oil, more energy for air conditioning, or more.
Well, because I honestly think like, yes, it's profit. It's also like crazy religious shit. I think to some degree, like they're, all like, it's the planet is yours. Take it, burn it, do what you want with it, murder all of the animals. Like that is kind of like their whole thing, because they're like, this is a present to us from our deity that like we believe in. That came across really weird, but
well, would you have any obligation to take care of it? Like,
yeah, no, they're like, if it's a present, you can just like smash that shit to hell. That because people love it when they give you a present and then you set it on fire.
That
so who was the person who's like planet Earth, like, oh, it's Ann Coulter, the rape it, do it what you want with it planet thing. I forget what the quote was, but it was a particularly bad one of hers.
Very super villainy. It's like these people, they live in a world where, like, I'm trying to comprehend it, where, I mean, I guess why they're angry and believe there's a liberal media and all of this, because all villains are them, right? Like everyone are clear. So maybe it's like, wow, they're giving all these villains a bad name. They're not so bad. The guy who wants to destroy the world or whatever. So this is somewhat of a transition. You're talking about the crazy religious reasons. So of the most, banana pants religious, Marjorie Taylor Greene, who has been called out as being a Christian nationalist. You've written about why Christian nationalist is a bad time, but she sort of embraced Christian national, not surprisingly.
Yeah, no. She's like, this is great. I am, of course, a Christian nationalist. And the thing is, like, the Christian nationalists they're not like shy about it. It's not like when I was younger and I thought that like only we called Christians born agains and it was offensive to them. Like they, we think like, oh, no one would want to be a Christian nationalist, but no, they're like, yes, this is what I want because I distrust government I hate big government. I distrust government so much that I want the government to tell everyone what their religion is allowed to be.
And she had, and I want to get back to that, but I remember something she had said was, kind of a mutual friend of ours had posted on Facebook her kind of proud Christian nationalism photo that she's selling T-shirts about it.
Yeah,
she's putting her dukes up like Jesus, and I've said this many times, but it's just, I miss how on Star Trek all the gods make sense. So Vulcans are logical, so their god is this logic guy, and then Klingons like to fuck shit up, so their god is a big warrior god. But it's
I didn't know that.
Why shouldn't your god? I mean, like if Jesus was like the Klingon warrior god and like was like just slaughtering people, it's like, okay, well, that makes sense for who you are and what you seem to believe. But this is like the Prince of Peace is not like where is this all? I mean, it makes no sense to me. But she was very much proudly selling her proud Christian nationalist T-shirts, and friends like, oh, they're just openly saying that they're Nazis or whatever. And then someone had unknowingly, I believe, said, well, that's like saying that any woke socialist is some pinko commie. And it's like, it's so frustrating because one, you'd be very hard pressed to find Democrats who would want to embrace the woke socialist term. But for someone who considers herself a socialist, do you mind telling the audience why you are not openly supportive of the rule of Stalin and Castro specifically?
Yeah, I don't think I have to do that. Like, does anyone know? I mean, people know what socialism is. Technically, I am a libertarian socialist, but which is like a fancy way of saying anarchist. But like,
well, it's just this weird thing where that's been conflated.
No,
and that's, well, this is this ideology. It got perverted, and we're Republican. Pretty much everyone in America, Democrat, Republican, except for a minority of folks, will say, "Oh, it's the same thing. Communism inevitably leads to Castro and Stalin and
Brandon." Yeah, but none of those were actual communism to begin with. Like, they weren't. They're just dictatorships. Yes. And there's
people aren't sharing. Like, there's no. Yeah, I guess there's a means of production owned, but ultimately it's a dictatorship. But there's like a philosophy that at least got
in actual communism, there is no government. Like, once you get to like there's no one in charge. Mm-hmm. And once you get to because communism is a thing that is evolved to, not like you go through socialism and then you get to communism. Like, there's never been an actual communist society on a large scale. There's actually never really been a purely capitalist society either. It's like you can kind of consider Somalia that, and possibly like Pinochet era Chile, but like not even really.
Yeah. And Putin, who was KGB and longs for the Soviet Union's rule and would love to replicate that, is hardly a communist. He's like,
he is a Christian nationalist and is like also proud of that.
And he wants to just spend money and have his buddies have the Russian oligarchs for their yachts and so forth. Whereas with Nazism, when someone is saying, because it is not like, oh, Hitler perverted your noble philosophy of white Christian nationalism. No,
that's what it is.
That's what it was, which is just like, if you study it, it's like, as the doctor said about the Daleks, it's like crushing anything that's just the slightest bit different under your foot. Like, and you see it for dialogues, right? So if you're queer, if you're trans, if you're minorities or whatever, you are lesser and you're destroying the nation and you're ruining the world, and because in a perfect world everyone would be exactly like them and then they'd feel okay. And they don't defending themselves. They view it as, oh, we are defending ourselves from you.
Yeah.
And they don't study, because they don't study history. They don't see that that's what Hitler, he wasn't just saying, let's go out and kill the Jew. Everything was very much narrative of, this is what these people did to us. They destroyed our noble world. Mm-hmm. The backstabber myth of like, they are why we have problems. We need to destroy them. We are defending ourselves.
Yeah, and it was always very much that.
Even to the point where
from the beginning, it was never like, oh, we're just gonna we just hate all these people for no reason. Yes, they did hate those people for no reason, but they very much presented it as like, oh, they're the ones crushing us. They're the ones, we'd have recovered from World War II or World War I if that, if it weren't for.
And I thought that was BS. Maybe they did. A lot of those people might have believed it, the extent that we see here. If you talk to certain people, and in many cases, Martin Luther Green was a civilian 3 years ago, right? Mm-hmm. That was what she believed. Like, I don't think it is chess maneuvering. And I think what is fascinating, again, it's the same like the FDR mistake of thinking that and I think there's a reason. I'm curious your thought as to why we always this idea of, oh, these people are saying these horrible, vile things just to gain power. Then when they gain power, they of course stop saying those horrible, vile things.
Which does not appear to happen.
It is no, they want power to do the horrible, vile things they've been saying. It is like, at every good Republican. So you get like the good Republicans, like, so they exist. Like, Tim Miller had his memoir out, and Saving David Frum. They all dealt with some of the worst, horrible people, but they believed that they knew that they were people who voted for them, and that's how they're candidates. That's how they got elected. But there was a structure, right? Going back from George H.W. Bush, Horton. The idea is that I know that a good significant number of my coalition, we can debate how large that coalition is, but it's enough that they can't ignore them, is racist, is horrible, like horrible people. Yes. Martin Green, Lauren Boebert, Matt Gaetz. I need to give enough of them for them to come along. There'll be something, a little Jesse Helmsism.
Little dog whistle, like.
And that but then we will be presentable. We're good people and we can go to the cocktail party. So that was George H.W. Bush, then George W. Bush. And then, Jeb Bush thought, okay, well, here's my turn to do that. And I'm going to work with these people, the Steve Bannons and so forth.
I would say like George W. Bush is like one of that's when shit started getting like extra crazy. I mean, it was crazy with Reagan, but he definitely
power. The people around him believed that their guy was in power, and the March of the Greens was still putting him in power, but we are running things.
Yeah.
And Jeb was thought they'll be the same thing, right? No. We're now Trump.
No, they want themselves represented now. Like they're like, we don't need we don't need you guys pretending to, be us. We want like the real deal.
It's like the why do we need a front man business? I think kind of that's what we do now. Like we're an organized crime, right? So, but there's still, though, you'll still hear this idea of they don't really believe these things. They don't really. DeSantis doesn't really believe this. He picks these fights. No, I think he really believes this stuff.
I think part
of it's educated, Robyn. He's Harvard educated.
Yeah, no, you can say it's a classism thing. They think that a lot of people think that if you go to an Ivy League school, if you go to private schools and everything, you have to be, a better person. You have to be like they wouldn't let you into Harvard, sorry, force of habit, old habit, but they wouldn't even let you into Harvard if you were like how he is. Like that wouldn't be a thing. Like if they trained that right out of you. There are no assholes who ever went to Harvard except for all the assholes who went to Harvard.
But also the class that like the upper crust classes, people like the people who were shocked that someone in the royal family might have said something racist about it's like, well, they don't even know black. They barely know. They barely hang out with they wash their hands after shaking hands with an Italian person. You're telling that they're shocked by like me, like, oh my God, they said something like it doesn't make any sense to me. It was, and it's like to me, growing up in a working class Southern environment, it's like you're more likely amongst this sort of you call the deplorables or ignorant class people. They had black friends. They were more likely to have black friends, to be around. That's why the government had to come in and say, you guys, it's really like they're playing together. They're going to see school. Someone has to come in and say, no. It was always like, I remember someone's like, hey, I want you to come over to play and then he would have to come in and tell me later, oh, my mom says you can't.
Yeah.
But he doesn't understand this. It's someone telling him from the top down of what the order, the structure is. But if you are in the Kushner realm, you're
just regularly running into black people.
They're like running elevators for you, or getting like you view these people as people who work for you. And so the idea that they are beyond racism or whatever. I mean, I get the idea that like the transphobia and the homophobia and all of that. It's like, oh, well, surely they are beyond that. No, they're not.
No.
And stuff. So I just think we need to accept that this is who they are. This is what they believe. And I think it goes back to what you were saying earlier that really kind of annoys you about the authoritarianism, where they're like shocked people have these authoritarian beliefs, or it's like they'll say, well, it's just they're skeptical of government. It's like, no, they're not.
They're absolutely not. They love government. They just don't like helping people. Like that's their issue. Like if government was just all like telling people who they can fuck and who they can marry and when they can have baby, like, or forcing them to have babies, they would love government. But they don't like the part of government that is like functional. I actually probably distrust government or the government more than these people do. But I am. It's not the same thing, because a lot of people are like, oh well, if you say you distrust the government, then how can you say that the government should do XYZ to help people? Because no, I want the government to do its job, but if we're talking about like, do I trust the government to put someone to death who is like, no, I don't. Do I trust the government to not lie about weapons of mass destruction? I do not. But
government as
healthcare, do it.
But to me, it's I'm skeptical of the government as well. But the idea of, oh, you trust the government can't do, they'll find some reason the government can't do something. The government can't do this. You trust them to do your healthcare, and it's like, well, why would I trust a corporation more? It's like it, and so, but authoritarians. So in America, it's a tremendous authoritarian movement, and their sense is we believe there needs to be an in-group that is protected from the poor people and the minorities, and also protected and also free to do whatever they want. That's the in-group. And the laws apply to us. Then the out-group, the law must apply to. That is the definition of it. So when the media still goes on with like, wow, Trump is really law and order in his speech, but he's like, law and order has been a code for keeping the N-words in line for decades. So when you're reporting on this, just report that Trump, who tried to overthrow the government, wants to keep the N-words in line. There's no conflict between what he said. He's always wanted to keep the N-words in line, and that is not like a shock of when he says this. It's this, but I think the problem is a disconnect of wanting to face what the world is. Like there's a big problem on the left, because you will get, I mean, the president had did this. He sent something out of like, how can Republicans be say they're pro-police when they're pro-coup? Well, those are two separate things. Also, how
can they be skeptical of government and love the police as much as they say they do? Oh, really? I'm totally skeptical of the police, or of the state, unless it's the police shooting an unarmed black man. That you got to trust some fabulous judgment is what the government has in that situation.
Well, even when the black cop shot Ashley Babbitt, it was and that was one of the most clear, like she's literally breaking the seat of government and whatever, and he's shocked and surprised. I'm like, well, my brother, you're part of an institution. They believe your job is to keep N-words,
protect them.
And when you shot the white lady doing what she wanted to do, you broke the rule. Like that's like the butler. The butler saying, Master Wayne, like you can't do who are you ordering me around?
Like get me a coffee? I don't know.
No, it's like not that it doesn't work. So the Justice Commission is doing a couple things. Overall great work. Two things that kind of bug me. One is to present this narrative of Republicans standing up against a coup, even though the Republicans who did are a minority of the party who was full on with the coup. Also, they're being thrown out of office left and right. And they're presenting this narrative of our wonderful law enforcement. They're wonderful. And yes, the Capitol police officers who held back the coup, they were great. But just based on data, there were more cops part of the crowd, like at the Stop the Steal rally in general, but also there's been more cops arrested for breaking into the Capitol or being on the Capitol, than actually were trying to stop the coup.
Yeah.
And that is
also the military. Yeah.
That is an issue, right? Like you have this white nationalist movement within law enforcement, even within the Secret Service
Mm-hmm.
scene. And, you know, instead, I feel like Democrats have spent the past 4 years kissing cops' ass, or 2 years.
This is the thing. They always want like their opportunity to be like, we're the ones who like cops. We're the ones who love like the military and war and things. We're the ones who want to give $70 billion to corporate welfare. Like, see, we're like, we owned you. And like, yeah, I don't.
That reminds me
actually is that great
of something else, what you just said about corporate welfare and whatever. So I don't know if you saw this. So Andrew Yang and David Jolly and
the third way thing.
So it is this weird. Why do they believe they have anything anyone wants? So that like this idea of like there are certain centrist Democrats who believe there's a market for centrist economic policy without that pesky identity politics. No doing too much wokeness or doing sort of whatever, and that's the key to success. And then there's the party that believe that, oh, well, we can give you Paul Ryan's economic plan, but without being overtly racist and misogynistic and queerphobic. And that there's just been proven to be no market for it. Instead, it's sort of, I guess because they view it, and I can understand that, they view it as those things being wholly negatives, the wokeism or the bigotry or conservative. So if I go into a retail store and I was like, I want to shop here, but I don't want to be like, I don't want someone throwing rocks at me. That's a bad scene. I'll go to a place where I can buy a shirt without having rocks thrown at me. But, you know, if I view it as, oh, this is a place where I can go and buy shops, but, you know, beautiful women will flatter me while I'm there and I'll have a glass of wine, that's a great deal. And it just seems like, so if I'm there, it's like, oh, no, come to our store and there will be no wine and lovely ladies. It's like, what? Well, why do you're not offering me anything I want? So I think that, you know, for me, the only reason I would even bother with the centrist economic policy is that you're protecting more marginalized groups, and you believe marginalized groups exist, and you're on board with us. And if I'm inclined to care about Paul Ryan's, you know, economic plan, which no one did, it's profoundly unpopular. That's been the conservative economic policy.
But he's a numbers guy, Stephen, a numbers guy.
That's the most overt. I mean, I get the idea of, I get that it's embarrassing for you to have to protect me as my person or stand up for these things. I get the, you know, but like the economic policy has never been popular. What's always sold it has been the bigotry and the racism. And it's just like the Republican Party has like been a party.
No, this is like no one what I will tell you that is actually like, a lot of people may not believe me, but I'm telling you what is coming next on the right in terms of like what you hear a lot of them sort of talking about on their like crappy social media things. The rise of, I shit you not, the fiscally liberal social conservative. It is happening. Like because here's the thing, like there's a lot of them who consider that part of their nationalism.
That makes far more sense though. And even when you talk about the success, like Reagan didn't bring out some, you know, broke ass white couple in Ohio who poor and on welfare and point at them and say like they shouldn't have anything and let's defund this white kid's school and snatch candy from a white. It was very racially, you know,
like he was very clear about like who he was talking about.
Because otherwise, America, you know, it's like our GoFundMe society. So you just like, I could raise tons of money today, just put a photo of some white kid And it's like, oh, can we raise money for this kid to buy a bus? And if you made it a program, right? Like, oh wow, this person, it's so frustrating, right? We talked about this. So if I say, oh, well, Robyn has to walk 20 miles to work every day, and that sucks because you can't afford to get a car. And oh my God, here's like all the money for you to buy a car. And I was like, okay, well, can we sort of scale up this program and do something so that people can afford to fix their cars? This situation happens a lot, and I have data that shows of where when a car breaks, like, and the boss is like, you still got to show up to work and whatever. It's like, oh no, that's socialism.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, I need another.
We need a company to take a profit off of it, or it doesn't count. Like,
show me this old black guy who's walking to work at 4 a.m. to get in at work at 6. I just go like, oh, that's good. It makes me feel good. Let me put it. It's like, I don't want to see it. I don't even want to like hang out with the old guy. I just want to like. I understand we should have a system in place. Is this?
I feel like most uplifting news in general is like, hey, it's like also like, hey, it sure is super depressing that we don't have any kind of like decent social safety net. Like, that kind of sucks. Too bad. All these Walmart workers did a canned food drive for their co-workers. Like, that is America.
Yeah, it's like the 70-year-old waitress who's like, all you do is one segment. 70-year-old waitress, she's rubbing her feet because she has to stand up and do whatever. And they're like, oh, that's sad. Well, let's raise enough money. She can go get a spa treatment, a pedicure. I'm like, you understand? Like, it sucks that she still has to work.
No, there's a thing the other day about a 90-year-old nurse or health. I didn't think it was like a nurse. It was like she's been working here for 25 years and she's 90 years old. Celebrate. It's like, why is that 90-year-old woman working?
Well, our system is screwed up, right? Because that's been there was something going around. It was some news article, and it was this man. It's like I'm 49 years old, and when can I retire? Like, what? You're like a hedge fund guy. What are you talking? Like, you could do this for a while without crippling bodily injury or something. And what that really means is for a lot of people, it's like, when can I become landed gentry, where my money is building other money and other, like, that's what should happen. Like, whenever a 55-year-old guy retires, he's just like, okay, well, you're now the Duke of Douchebag, and you get to like live off the earnings of other people for the rest of your life. Your children will do the same, because it's like, well, my kids need to go to college, and they need more stuff, and that's sort of our system that we have. And then meanwhile, if you go to working class people, go to lower, it's like, I'm never going to retire. And I don't know how and I'm more likely to have health problems. I haven't been able to afford to see the doctor. I have no idea. Like, it is all effed up. It should be a system of just like, okay, well.
And they're like, but those lazy poor people, unlike the hedge fund managers.
Well, the cops.
Well,
the cops are because they're sort of their own kind of protection racket. They've set it up. Their system is what everyone should have, right? So they're like, you're shooting at me, except you're not really getting shot at every day. But instead, it's like, I do something dangerous. I'm going to do this for 20 years, and I get to retire at a certain pension. And I think certain jobs that are very demanding, physically demanding, okay, you did that for 20 years, you get to retire and you have a pension, it's a comfortable life. But, it isn't for most people. And it is, back to the larger point, we were able to say these people should suffer and die because it's inherently that's the larger like, people will say, like, why can't we have the same security network that these European nations have? It's like, well, because they're predominantly white, and their studies have shown that as their populations got more diverse, you started to see shifts of like, wait a minute, why am I sharing my stuff with these people?
And the scary thing is that is also like, a thing I have heard Nazi, like, white supremacists say, where they're like, well, I would be okay with all of these things if it was just white people, because there's, yeah.
Oh, yes. Well,
they're horrible people.
I think there was someone who used to visit Wonkette who hated FDR. Was in a real FDR tear.
Oh, yeah.
Everyone sense was like belief that all progressives would sell out Black people at an instance. And I'm hardly someone who runs around defending the honor of white people, but it is, I think this is weird thing of
even I don't do that.
Yeah, well, so sort of use, centrists would often use Black people as this human shield. And it's just like, well, whatever your issues were with Sanders or if with Warren, they're probably, Warren especially, and whatever, are more inclined to not, I don't think they're going to sign the, okay, all white people get free healthcare.
Yeah.
And Black people don't. Like, that was never, like, there was really a belief of just that Sanders couldn't be trusted on that court. Like, Mitch McConnell would be like, okay, well,
how about this?
I'll F all my donors if you give healthcare to only white people. And he's like, done. And, you have this deal that seemed highly.
We'll cover everything but sickle cell anemia.
Yeah, everything. It's no breast cancer and every. So, where are we actually on thinking of women's health or people with anyone who has a uterus that the government now owns? How do we? Are things? Do you see any sort of?
No.
You're getting progressively worse, right? Like these.
Yeah, pretty much everything is just like getting very, very bad. It's like all I can.
Well, everyone was like, they will never do this, right? They won't try to arrest these doctors, or they won't try to arrest these women. Oh no, it's like, yeah, they totally are. And I don't.
Here's the thing. They get really excited over getting to do that kind of thing. It makes them feel good about themselves and it makes them feel powerful. So of course they are going to want to do that. Like, of course they are. And, the only reason, Ted Cruz is like, we'll keep sodomy legal in Texas, is probably because he thinks he's going to get some at some point. I mean,
he's highly
someday he's gonna
holding up. Not to make any assumptions about Heidi Cruz, but I just love that.
I'm pretty sure it's like a lying back and thinking of England type situation.
I served that up, and you just hit it out of the park of just this arch look.
I will tell you the most evil article I ever wrote. I think it was either for Death and Taxes or the Frisky. And it was just like, what does Ted Cruz's O-face look like? And I just had like all these like it had something to do, it was relevant in some capacity. But I just had all these like pictures of Ted Cruz going like it was actually very easy to find like terrible, like Ted Cruz doing terrible things with his face. And people were very like, not upset at me, like as in like I got like canceled kind of way, but they were like, why would you do this to us or ever make us think about that? And I'm like, because I'm a terrible person. Like, what do you want from me?
Someone has willingly done with Ted Cruz what most of us would pay a hefty fine to avoid.
Yeah.
It's sort of like, I feel like sex with Ted Cruz is like you're trying to avoid that deal you made of Rumpelstiltskin. It's like, oh my God, how do I get out of this? Oh my God. So he's so back to someone slightly less horrible, because Ted Cruz is one of the most horrible people who existed. So Ron DeSantis, apparently I was reading today where he's trying.
I'm gonna say it's a tie, but go ahead.
He is trying to pull the liquor license of places that had drag brunches or drag.
Yeah.
And I want to also, because again, I feel like among liberals,
because again, they're skeptical of government. They don't want the government interfering with anything except for drag brunch.
And I always say, and I feel like people will say I beat up on Democrats a lot. I feel like you really need to make hay on this. I was out with someone a while back who fairly, uh, not necessarily overly political, not necessarily some raging woke liberal, but would take their kid to a drag brunch who wouldn't, right? And was horrified that this was a thing. Like, what? How dare you think that I'm a bad parent for doing this? Like, a lot of suburban white ladies would be horrified. Like, you need to hammer it. But I feel like Democrats think it's a silly thing and that they are embarrassing themselves by making drag. Like, no, a lot of people do this. Or normal.
Yeah, everyone loves drag queens, except for like weird Republicans who are like, that's sex. And it's because they don't really like, so much know about sex. So they're like, obviously this is a sexual thing.
But it's literally Shakespeare, right? So like if I were to describe to him, okay, like Romeo and Juliet, but one of Juliet is played by a young boy wearing women's clothing and a kiss on stage, he'd lock me up. But it's like, well, no, that's how it was performed for a day, for a long time before women were allowed on stage. And just but I feel like to break this down, that the sexualization of drag is nuts, because they're basically saying that if I'm in front of a child dressed this way, it's totally okay. But if I put on makeup, but not like TV makeup, like if I'm on TV, but
and the kid's gonna go like, that's what sex is.
That's like eyeshadow, or if I'm like a dress, but not a kilt, because we presume that Scottish people, that's okay. Is it like just been this is masculine clothing, is a stamp? Like
I think it's honestly they're very confused. Matt Walsh on Thursday, which is not today, was going on this whole thing about how, straight people they're not straight people at orgies. And like, yeah, no, there are. Like that never happens. Straight people never have sex with a bunch of like different people in one day. And like, that definitely happens. I don't know what to tell you, porn exists. But like, I think that there's this genuine, like, not genuine, because nothing about them is that genuine, but I think to some degree they're like, what is sex? And they're like, drag, that must be sex. We've heard of people who, like, I think that they're just throwing anything out there and being like, that is sexual. Also because they're bigots. But they're bigots who are bad at sex.
It's just so, and this is a youth, DeSantis is in his 40s. And it's the reverse of how the film would be. Like, imagine if it's DeSantis versus Biden, for example, and you would think it would be the 100-year-old guy who's like, there's drag in these clubs, and oh my god, and the guy in his 40s like, dude, what's going on? Instead, it's a reverse, and he's like, the older guy is like, what?
Yeah.
So
no,
it's just, but how long have we been told that every generation is going to get better? Like, it's no. Everything that's awful about conservatism just endures, and it actually gets worse.
Oh yeah,
it's like a growing these Shapiro, Walsh,
Nick Fuentes, like all they're fucking terrible people.
Well, the incels are grown in power. Do you feel like they've grown more in power than they were perhaps in the culture? I'm not saying that the Rick Wilsons and David Frums, when they were in the rooms, were necessarily better people, but I don't know. It just seems like I would be surprised. I'm not expecting wokeism from David Frum, but I just feel like some of the stuff you're hearing from these Trump administration officials, like the way they're referring to women and doing things, is just and maybe it is the veneer of chivalry. Like, there's a veneer of chivalry of what you said about a woman, that you could still be a sexist asshole. Yes. You just didn't talk about women a certain way. I certainly grew up, not that I grew up around people like David Frum, but I grew up in a world where that was like, some of this stuff you'd be like, get out of here, scoundrel. Like, Matt not be invited. Get out of here, scout. Like, he was not, your reputation would not be improved by associating with Matt Gaetz, right? Like, so,
yeah,
but what he was saying about women, and someone had explained it as like the inverse of perhaps a George Carlin joke that did not age particularly well, but he was
yeah,
saying, you ever notice that the women who are against abortion is someone you never want to fuck?
yeah.
Later turned it to all people, but it was still sort of a loaded, but that was a while ago. And he's not a,
And as I said last week, if anyone looks like a thumb, I mean, I am not a looksist person. I would not like, judge someone for that. But I'm not. But yes, he does look like a thumb or a big toe.
He looks like a scumbag. I'm looking enough. I feel like, because there's a part of isn't there a part? I can see that there's a part of the arts that is somewhat lookist in the sense of, I only have so much time. I need to convince people that this woman's fallen in love with this guy. Let me cast Brad Pitt.
Yeah.
I need audiences to really get that this person's a creepy asshole. Let me cast the person who looks like Ted Cruz, right? Like, there's types and looks.
Yeah.
And I try, and people try to make it noble. It's like, no, it's something about his soul, his spirit, no, like Ted Cruz and Mac, they look like assholes.
They look like creeps. Yeah.
And I don't
like Ted Cruz looks like he's, gonna be like doing something very creepy, whereas Matt Gaetz looks like he's gonna be like
he's already
the obnoxious frat guy who like who's like not even the villain of the movie, because like he's not like good looking enough to be the jock villain. He's like the jock villain's like annoying friend who's like, ugh, like
there's no James.
That's what people are like.
Where's the James Spader of the group, right? You have the James Spader, and then their henchmen would be Cruz and Gaetz. But like, there's no. I mean, I guess Josh Hawley would consider himself the Spader. He is not. He has the book out. The Kansas City Star.
You love James Spader,
as everyone should.
Yeah.
The headline read, Josh Hawley's manhood on sale in May. He's writing a book about manhood.
Yeah.
And why the left, women, he's talking about women, why are trying to destroy manhood. But this is like Frank T.J. Mackey. This is Tom Cruise from Magnolia. Like, this is, you almost feel like you're being punked, right? Like, this is not real, right? This is a man who's written a book, and he's a sitting senator, about why this gender term, these women are trying to emasculate men. It's like a pickup artist book. He's right. Like, what's happening, Rob?
It's the world that we live in now, Stephen. That is what is happening. Like, it's basically a shtick at this point now. Like, if you're a Republican, if you're a conservative, you have to at least at some point talk about how no one will let us be men anymore because we're so manly that look. If people like let us be, we can only be manly if like the women let us be manly. So guess we're not gonna like, I guess it's like too bad for you, Josh Hawley, not gonna allow it.
Yes, like every Western, like Clint Eastwood's like, I'm gonna be a man now, and the woman comes out and says, you're not. And he's like, okay.
Yeah. And then he's like, oh, too bad. Like, no one is fucking stopping you from doing, whatever it is that you think makes you manly, unless it's like rape, in which case, you're gonna go to prison. Like, I don't know what it is that they think we're like preventing them from doing.
It's also a lot of along those lines, seems eerily pro-rape arguments that women are offering their bodies up enough. Because his one thing he was talking about was,
but also they don't want women to have sex ever,
unless with these men. But
unless they're like going to get pregnant.
the idea being that there's men should not be having porn, watching porn, doing so is tough. And my sense is that if you had obviously maybe you can do porn all you want, but often people will choose the real thing over maybe not, but like he's viewing it as the porn's preventing it because women are not doing their end of the bargain. It's just crazy stuff. I mean, and I don't know.
Like, I'm so manly, I need feminists permission to do whatever it is I think is manly.
But they're still whining. I felt like your toxic the toxic masculinity, the made flesh.
Toxic masculinity is the most whiny shit on earth, is the thing. Like, it's not like, oh man, they're just like so macho, it's amazing. No, it's the whiniest fucking shit on earth.
Trump beat Clinton. You would think that Clinton's been president for the past since 2007, right? In 2017. And this is what callers, these incels are writing this book in reaction to under the matriarchal thumb of Queen Clinton, because she would have declared herself queen on
well, certainly.
Empress, maybe. I am Empress Clinton, and now we shall. But that didn't happen. Your pussy guy, grabbed by the pussy guy, won.
Well, the grabbed by the pussy guy didn't deliver in that way. He didn't get what was supposed to happen. But before Trump was elected, there were all these people who were saying and this is going to be the end of people on Facebook telling me that I'm a racist or a sexist for saying racist or sexist things. They really thought that he was going to change the culture. And very much believed this. He was going to change the culture and things were going to go their way from now on. And it didn't. We still stayed us. And they didn't get what they wanted out of Trump. What they wanted out of Trump was not necessarily anything legislative. Yes, the more legit, not legit, but whatever. Certain Republicans were like, oh, I'll vote for him because, he'll do terrible conservative things and appoint terrible conservative judges. These people wanted a legitimate, cultural change.
Yeah.
And they did not get it.
Well, there's no policy choice
and they're pissed.
Trump made that Cruz, Rubio, Jeb, any of the 17, the Clonkar members would not have delivered. So what separated Trump was the other stuff, the toxic mess. This is what I'm going to be off the forgotten man and all for myself. And they believe that this would somehow change the world. And obviously it did not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
People continue to hate them. And, they're not better off socially than they were before. One of their big complaints is still one of their big complaints. And it's, we don't get to be assholes on Twitter and Facebook as much as we would like. And, we have our own social networks, but it's not really enough for us. It's just, we have to be seen by liberals for some reason, who then have to convert to our way of being. It's very and there's anger over that. Or at least I sense it. I think it's definitely a thing. That's why they keep getting increasingly wacky.
They're just infuriated that queerness exists.
Yes.
I mean, and folks are but the masculinity stuff's been huge, right? Bobart said recently that the same-sex marriage is attacking masculinity and so forth, and it's interesting because that is acceleration of the rhetoric. So before it was just to try to talk about marriage as using traditionalism and stuff. That's how John Roberts talked about. But John Roberts didn't use incel theories. He was going our tradition of a man and a woman and creation or whatever. And here they just kind of going. I mean, again, everything that's underneath the surface they are pounding at, and it is kind of just sort of to me bonkers, but obviously very it's Nazism, right? Like it's
Well, you grew up in a small town.
Yeah, my dad grew up in a town, my mom grew up in a small town. I am from a small town. I'm gonna go on song, the Mellencamp song. I was gonna go the whole way in. But
I thought you were. No, but like, okay, so if you grew up in a small town, like there is not legitimate as in like valid, but like legitimate fury over people being different. Like it's not just, oh, we're making fun of this person because they're different. It's like there's a very like, how dare you kind of element. Like it's like they feel betrayed on some level, or like disrespected. Like if you respected us, if we were well respected and you were, giving us what we deserve, you would conform to our way of being. And you not doing that is you saying you don't respect us. And so now we're at a point where like, most people are just letting their freak flag fly, and they're just like, being who they are. And the more that happens, and the more these people have to bear witness to it, the more they feel disrespected. Because the fury was palpable. It wasn't just, anger at like, or just like, oh, haha, it's funny that this person is different. It's very much a, why are you doing this to me kind of thing. Like, I don't.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like, and that's an acceleration of it. There's a level of just outright bullying that's fun to bully this person. Almost like in certain sitcoms from like 60 years ago or whatever years ago, just like it's meant to be an assertion of dominance. So a lot of minstrel stuff, or like women, it's assertion of dominance, of our power over these people. And then, yes, you can track it to where it then becomes like fear-based.
So you can make fun of people or like disrespect other people and then still be at the top, then that's your power. Like if you like are, to put this in like school terms, if you're the school bully and you get to be an asshole to people and everyone still likes you, then that is an assertion of power. And then you feel good about yourself. And it's the same thing with like basically everything else. Like, oh, I can go put on blackface and, do a show, and everyone will say, oh, that's fine because you're so wonderful. Or whatever, like, because you have power, you are able to do that, you are able to get away with doing that. And so what these people are constantly learning is, no one's letting you get away with shit, and it means that you're not special, like you thought you were.
I'm not too far on field on that, but like a lot of the that makes punches, like making fun of poorer people or associating classishness with poorness. So tons of sitcoms have done that. So it's just like, let's make fun of poor people. They are silly and stupid, and it is part of that bullying, but also perhaps reinforcing the order of it is a moral failing to be poor, and generally people are this way. They're uneducated, they're ignorant because they are morally inferior to us. But yeah, I mean, I don't know what the best answer is to what, but when you're selling white Christian nationalist T-shirts, I feel like that's a part of that's part of the, tomorrow belongs to me. Starts to be singing. Hopefully, I mean, I feel like she will just go out and start singing. Like, I don't know. I feel like
I can picture it with the whole outfit and everything. She's got the hair. It's just, I
wonder, yes, you can just sort of trick. I mean, she probably would think it's a lovely song because she doesn't do depth, right? So she's just like, oh yeah.
What a beautiful moment at the end of this movie. Huh.
What is lovely. Tomorrow does
best part of the show.
The moment will come in the world. Like, I mean, you could probably get her to sing that on election on the midterm nights.
I don't know that anyone wants to hear her sing.
What if she had a lovely voice, Robyn? Wouldn't that confuse you?
I mean, I I think more about her confuses me than that. Like that's like that would be not even touching anything.
What if it was so wonderful you really wanted like listen more, like it was just such a beautiful voice, but you had to stop yourself because it was just like, no, she's evil. But man, she really hits those notes.
No, I don't think that would happen. I can like you can hear it in her voice that she like does not have a particularly resonant sound.
Yes, I mean, yeah,
because like usually people from because like I think the Georgia accent is gorgeous, but hers is like very. It's just it's not pleasant. It is not melodious.
That's like it's bad news. That's like
yeah.
when you hear her voice,
it's very harsh. Like it's like a weird like nasal Southern accent or something. I don't
know. It's bad. It's also because of her. I think from her history, I think she's someone who she kind of shows up in the middle of the lynching. So once you hear that voice, it's already like you've already it's already bad news. It's just like this has got to go worse from here because she's only shown up. All right, now let's get them on fire, boys. Yeah, it's like
do a little cackling.
Yes, the cat. Yeah. I mean, Marjorie Taylor Greene is, but Lauren Boebert is also like also terrible. Like, there's a whole sense of like really, at least Stefanik. And what is fascinating is none of them were the focus group tested anti-squad. The GOP had their own kind of monkeys, right-wing monkey like knockoffs of the squad that they intended.
Mm-hmm.
And in 2020 of the oppression class, some of them were women of color specifically, right? Because that's the perfect programming. And so I think and there was an Asian descent, a Cuban woman, and they were going to like be their anti-squad, and we've heard nothing of these women.
Yeah.
the breakout stars of the white Christian nationalist party. But it's interesting because I feel like whoever kind of manages the big leadership of the Republican Party still wants to present that the veneer of respectability. It's like, they'll present our evil policies and whatever, and it'll be multicultural and great and not overtly racist and misogynistic. It'll be like they hold on to this dream. And it's just like there's some liberals who are like, oh man, what we really need to worry about is Nikki Haley running. No, you don't. But man, I'd give anything if Marjorie Taylor Greene was running for president. Why? Because
now like there are also like I guess like certain Democrats like trying to invest in like putting the crazy people like getting them to win their primaries and everything. And I'm like, no, that's not good. They're more likely to win. Like,
well,
and then be extra horrible. Like, that's not good. They're like, no.
We've like learned nothing from this, right? Like when I wrote about this, I mentioned it, and I even got a quote from the gentleman, David Axelrod, saying this is concerning and whatever. And I got the interesting response of, this is obviously fake news. It's like, well, this article quotes David, like, no. It's all Democrats in the very fake news. They're not doing that. They're just trying to define these people early. It's like, really? Like, what do you mean by that? It's like they're defining them as early. It's like, well, that's not going to help, because if you're trying to define a candidate as too, what you deem as too, quote unquote, crazy, that is only going to encourage. It's like Republicans saying, I want to define during this primary in a potentially overwhelmingly Democratic district, I want to define this candidate as crazily socialist liberal. And we be going, oh, wow, she's awesome. Thanks for telling us all the cool stuff about her. Even though you think this is all stuff that will be fatal in a general election, this is a Democratic primary, right? So talking about this person's best friends with Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Yay, that's awesome.
Yeah, which is like, it's like, that's what Oz keeps trying to do with Fetterman. They're like, oh, he's friends with Bernie Sanders, who is continually the most popular politician in the United States, always. So like wins every time they do it, no matter how much people hate him on Twitter. Like, every time.
Well, there was a consistent argument that like he did as well as he did during the primary because of misogyny against Clinton. Which, if you believe that, then you would argue that well, he's still a white man,
Yeah.
so he still is probably not as radioactive as. So it's like these people having, and you've said before, like having two different opposing views that make no sense at the same time actually is they can do that because it's
Yeah.
ultimately about. I mean, conspiracy theories actually work on that premise that it helps to have the theories that don't really hold up an examination. So he can, Sanders can benefit from being the white guy in the room, but he could also be radioactive in places where he's the white guy in the room, even though that doesn't make any sense. So, but yes, trying to link him to Sanders is not, it just doesn't.
Yeah, no, I feel like, yeah, it's not working. Like,
well, it's also, there's no overt evidence that Sanders has some crazy agenda that is radically different from what Democrats are already promoting. Besides shorthand, so people aren't necessarily scared of him. It's not like, oh, he's going to come in and take all our money away. I mean, I feel like that's never been tested. I think that's always been the fear that would happen, but that's just never. I think to a certain point, he's viewed as a certain standard Democrat. I mean, obviously, the Never Trumpers everyone loves disagree, but going back to having these competing views, if you listen to Never Trumpers about Sanders, then you should listen to Never Trumpers about Harris and Clinton, and they distinctly don't like either of them. So it was interesting this week when everyone's favorite Never Trumper, Adam Kinzinger, had come out with some really stupid comments about Kamala Harris. And it was like, yeah, I mean,
I missed that, and I'm glad that I did.
Most Never Trumpers don't like Harris, and that's, doesn't mean they're right. It just means that if you are retweeting Never Trumpers all the time, you're gonna have to be accepting that, well, that they're not part of this coalition you're building for the vice president. They will never support her. They'll always find, they will prefer the white. They're going to be Klobuchar, Buttigieg, Biden's ghost, and and maybe Joe Biden. Maybe Hunter Biden should run. I feel like he should just run, right?
Yeah, just do it.
Like you can't. You're already coming full on after me, and apparently I can't be prosecuted for anything if I'm running for president. So this could be the safest way. Well, we're almost at time. Thank you again for meeting me here on what is actually Sunday.
Yeah, it's definitely Sunday is what we're doing.
You're going to go out and do some Sunday activities.
Yeah. Well, actually, I'm going to watch the Pretty Little Liars Origins, not Origins or whatever. It's Original Sin, the first season, which premiered on Thursday, not today, Sunday. And I'm very excited about it because I love horrible soapy teenage dramas because I'm an adult person.
All right. Okay, well, rest up. Get your ankle.
Yeah.
A previous injury.
No. It's an injury from last night.
Yeah.
No, it wasn't like an I'm wasted injury. It was a I have weirdly narrow heels, and so if I have like the straps that go around the back of your foot, they fall off sometimes, and that is what happened while I was trying to get to a lift. It was embarrassing.
Oh, well, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to embarrass you. I just wish that you were feeling better. Go and rest.